but also to the Paris Olympics in 3 years' time. We'll be talking with Brian O'Driscoll about Munster finally beating Leinster after 6 games where they were on the wrong side of the result, and also looking forward to Leinster's trip to La Rochelle in the European Champions Cup this weekend. Also coming up in the football show, we'll be joined by Pat Nevin to take a look back at the weekend in the Premier League and the Carabao Cup final. End of call, we'll be looking at League of Ireland, and we'll also hear from Brian Kerr as well. All that to come between now and 10. If you want to get in contact with the show, text line is 53106. We're joined by Nathan Murphy. Good evening, Nathan.
Hiya, Will.
Richie McCormick is here with us as well.
Young Will, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Nathan, have you booked in your tea time as yet, given that you can now officially go back out and golf again?
Not just yet, no, because I'm awaiting on my membership to go through. So at the moment, every club is restricting it, obviously, to members only, and it's very hard to get on the timesheet at the moment. But looking out the window here at the most glorious April evening you could imagine, I'm very, very jealous of all the people who are maybe even just getting out of the car now and getting that nice little 9 holes in, because that is my favourite type of golf, is the summer months. Getting out, maybe even got the kids to bed about 7:30, 8 o'clock and getting out for 9 holes in the glorious sunshine and a bit of warmth that is there. And it's a little bit away from me just yet. The driving range is open though. Peter Lowry is open down the Spawell Golf Academy just down the road from me, so I might pop down to him over the next couple of nights. Funny, Will, I'm in a position a lot of parents are probably in right now, where I've spent 6 months going, get the kids back to sport. For God's sake, if they can be in a classroom, they can be outside playing together. And finally tonight, for a lot of people, it's happening. And then I realised that actually Monday evening is now the only evening of the week, the only day of the week that my children don't have something on. So GEA training back tomorrow night, Scouts Wednesday night, and between them there's soccer and GEA all the way through Thursday to Sunday. And I'm wondering already, Will, where's the me time? Where's the me time?
Richie, similar story in your house with the young McCormicks. I'm assuming they're heading out to all sorts of different training now.
I have an empty gaff right now. There's literally not a sinner in the house at the minute. Even the dog's gone out for a walk. The eldest has gone back training this evening with Whitehall, and then the middle lad is going to be going back tomorrow. And then you're going to have on Saturday all 3 of them out as well. So it's absolutely it's fantastic. The idea that the weather has suddenly been gifted upon us at the moment that we have, and that the kids can go back training, is just it's an absolute godsend. And it's like, as Nathan mentioned there, it's not before time. What I'm more confused by is with the exalted status of Golf Weekly and its, position on Patreon and all that kind of stuff. Is there not some kind of gold card that you can produce at any number of golf clubs to go, do you know who I am? Are you a friend of the pod?
You know me, Richie. I would never lower myself to begging for a free membership at a nice golf club in South Dublin, live on the radio on a Monday night. I would never do such a thing.
Well, Nathan, how did you let your membership lapse? I mean, you're meant to be one of the top golf nerds.
Well, maybe touching on what Richie was saying, I've sort of been a bit of a wanderer over the last few years amongst many different clubs, but I've decided now I need to settle down finally and, find somewhere that'll serve me for the next 30, 40 years. So I'm hoping to get that done in the next couple of weeks. But listen, if anybody has any openings, there's a lot of nice Manners, a lot of nice. There's a place just outside Limerick that I keep thinking of. It's not very well known, and it's a Ryder Cup venue in a few years. That, like, if they have any spare slots in the timesheet, I'll go down there for work essential purposes.
Nathan Murphy is not above degrading himself on this show to get some free tea times and not to have to pay green fees.
Anything.
Yeah, lads. Premier League Hall of Fame. This feels very American, but we're checking in the office. There is an English Football Hall of Fame. John Giles is part of it. But now we've got a post-1992 Hall of Fame as well. Nathan, was this needed?
I don't think so. I think a proper English Hall of Fame that could become a big event is definitely something we could all get behind. Obviously, it's something in America that's massively celebrated in the various different weekends through the year, or a brilliant reunion for all the former players, and it creates a real buzz and discussion point. But to split it from pre-92 and post-92, I know it's a marketing gimmick, and there is a National Football Hall of Fame that you can go visit in Manchester in non-COVID times. But I just think, do we need this? Even looking at the lineup of players, so Alan Shearer and Thierry Henry were the first 2 in, which I don't think is a great shock. I'm sure there's many Irish and Manchester United supporters thinking, well, Roy Keane should have been in there instantly, but Henry's the all-time greatest scorer and Shearer is English, so they were always likely to get in. But as you look at the shortlist, well, firstly, there's a number of problems. The shortlist is pretty much all the big 6. In fact, not just the big 6. It's pretty much all Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool. And the only players really outside of that are Les Ferdinand and Matt Le Tissier. I'm like, there has to be a room for the Maverick. You're just rewarding the great teams, and it's a public vote. So we know that Matt Le Tissier hasn't got a hope in hell of getting voted in to this Hall of Fame anytime soon when you look at the caliber of players that are in that 25-man shortlist. So, yeah, if there was a proper Hall of Fame that was acknowledged every year, it's something I could definitely get behind. This, yeah, it's a talking point. I'm sure we can clash over who should be in the next 6 to go through. But, yeah, it just feels a little bit, considering the week there's been where we're talking about the history of football and how the Premier League has tried to come forward as a shining light of what football should be, to sort of write off everything that's happened in the 100 years before. It's not great, is it?
Richie, are these two pretty safe options? I mean, Thierry Henry, probably the best all-round forward of the Premier League era. You put in the top scorer of the Premier League era. This, to me, seems like the two kind of obvious choices to start with.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair enough. If you're going to start any kind of Hall of Fame, you don't want to miss out on anyone obvious. They probably could have expanded the original class to 4 or 5 or maybe beyond to get in your Roy Keanes, to get in your Tony Adamses maybe, who've performed so brilliantly over the years in the Premier League for Arsenal. But yeah, I'm interested. The public vote thing is always going to cause trouble because it is going to just always either throw up the obvious or, there'll be a campaign that looks to go rogue and, induct somebody like a Rory Delap out of nowhere. But, I'd be interested. They should expand this out. Like, Will, you be a fellow wrestling nerd like myself and would see the different Hall of Fames they have in that. And one of them that jumps out is Dave Meltzer's Hall of Fame, whereby it's a balloted thing. So I think everybody who's had a say in the Premier League, they should basically send out ballots to everybody who's been involved in a playing capacity in the Premier League, similar to the way they do in the PFA award, and ballot everybody and give everybody a gradient system then and see who enters based on the top amount of votes, if they get like the most number 1 placings on the list out of 10, or if they get the most number 2s or whatever. But to have something like that where it's opened up a little bit more and where you're able to have a little bit debate about it, similar to the way the FIFA Player of the Year, every manager and captain of an international team gets to nominate their favourite. And the best part of that is scrolling down through the list and seeing the randomers that pop up as number 2 and 3 picks, or in often cases with Martin O'Neill's tenure in charge of Ireland, the randomers that turned up at number 1 for his pick of Player of the Year. So something like that where you can go and scroll and argue over who voted for whom and why can always add a nice bit of debate, rather than just going, these are your 2 Hall of Famers, good luck and goodbye, we'll talk to you next year.
Yeah, I always liked that Roy Hodgson voted for Javier Mascherano. I think it was after the 2014 World Cup, just entirely left field. No Messi, no Ronaldo in his top 3, but Javier Mascherano right there at the top. Inevitably,
who selected the shortlist
for this? I don't know. I think it was the Premier League themselves.
Because I'm surprised, considering it wasn't a public vote for the shortlist, that they haven't gone for a more expansive breadth of players. So where's Gareth Barry, who has played more Premier League games than anybody else? I know you're going to say, who do you take off? But it's just so obvious, the selection of players they've gone with. There is obviously a little bit of controversy in this as well, in that there's no Ryan Giggs on the shortlist. And Giggs, obviously, the most successful Premier League player there's ever been. We know exactly what's coming down the track and what's hanging over him at the moment. So they've obviously made a commercial decision, that it's for the betterment of this, that Giggs isn't involved.
Yeah, well, it would have brought unwanted attention straight away.
Yeah, true. Especially now, especially at the moment. But that's going to be, you're going to have your Pete Rose kind of cases whereby Pete Rose wasn't in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I don't think he still is in the Baseball Hall of Fame, over his career indiscretions, which I believe are involved around gambling. So you're going to have situations like that whereby there are glaring omissions and people are wondering why. Like a Gary Speed is going to have to be in there given the amount of Premier League appearances that he racked up between Leeds and Everton and Newcastle, but will probably be overlooked for somebody like David Ginola or something like that, who was, not necessarily there that long, but kind of seemed to make more of an impression in terms of flamboyance and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have odd cases cropping up here and there. And like I say, you would like to see the mechanism behind it made public, so you can kind of see who's voting for whom.
David Ginola, the Player of the Year when Manchester United won the treble. And again, you see a lot of United fans are texting us on 53106 about the Premier League Hall of Fame. Why is there no member of the most successful club in the Premier League era? No Cantona, no Beckham, no Roy Keane. I mean, obviously, Nathan, this is what people are going to argue. And I would imagine next year, when they've got an intake, say if it's Gerrard and Vieira that go in, people will argue Keane should go in ahead of Gerrard, or if it's Keane and Vieira, why not Gerrard? These are the type of probably online conversations we're going to have around this every year now.
And that's why having a public vote means it's always going to be players from Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, the three most and best supported clubs. I totally understand why you could make a claim for all of those players. You then have to go and say, well, what did Alan Shearer and Thierry Henry do wrong? If Shearer had signed for Manchester United when he could have, there's no question he would have been on this shortlist. So maybe they looked at it and thought these Manchester United players are probably all going to end up in there at some stage. It'll be interesting which six do get in, because it's hard to pick out who you leave out. So you'd have to assume Keane gets in. Keane, Vieira, Beckham, Lampard, Gerrard, Scholes. Is that your six?
Yeah, you got about 5 years of Hall of Fames there if they're going to do 2 a year.
Tony Adams.
You're leaving out John Terry, Ian Wright.
Yeah. Gary Speed, Gareth Barry.
There's also an argument because
Gary
lads,
Speed's not even on the shortlist.
That's insane.
I was just thinking as well, lads, given
insane.
how kind of short term this is in terms of it being 1992 onward, unlike other Hall of Fames where generally you will kind of go back a bit in history and you'll pick someone of an older vintage to put them in early in your Hall of Fame, you're picking guys who are only in their early 40s here. And I'm actually kind of surprised if they were going to go for a Teddy Sheringham or a Les Ferdinand or someone of that ilk. Surely you go for them before you start going for Henry.
Possibly, but Henry. I think Henry, if you're having the general votes to go for the greatest Premier League player of all time, Henry is always there in the top two. So I think it's understandable. And if you start getting into some of the lads who are a bit older, maybe it gets a little bit too complicated. But going back to your original point, if you're a listener and you're wondering who the greatest players of all time, I can recommend our series from this time last year with John Giles, where that's what you would love, where John Giles can go through Chelsea from 1955 to 2020 and tell you exactly and make the comparison between the left backs. Like when we were talking even about the Ireland all-time 11 and he's picking Tony Dunn at left back and you're saying, well, what about Steve Staunton? And he's like, well, Tony Dunn was the best left back in English football for 4 or 5 years. Like that is what you want from a Hall of Fame. That's what you need, that sort of longevity. And a Hall of Fame should be an opportunity to remember players. It should be an opportunity to spark conversation about players who haven't been spoken about. Whereas maybe it's our age, maybe actually, any 20-year-olds listening in are going, well, I don't know very much about Matt Letizia, the player, and I'd be interested to see him in the Hall of Fame. Maybe they've gone back and watched Alan Shearer's 260 Premier League goals, possibly, but I don't know. There'd be so many great talking points if you went all the way back.
Not a single mention of Kevin Kilbane.
Yes.
What year does it have to go to before Kilbane gets a nomination?
Let him answer that himself. The news round here on Off the Ball on News Talk with thanks to Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. We're starting off, Richie, with the Premier League this evening, and Leicester trying to consolidate their spot in the top four.
Yeah, they can take another step towards securing a Champions League return tonight. Will a win for Brendan Rodgers' side at home to Crystal Palace will put 7 points between them and the fifth place team West Ham. Kasper Schmeichel starts in goal for the Foxes tonight. They've then got a back three of Wesley Fofana, Johnny Evans and Chaglar Soyuncu, with Timothy Castagna and Justin Thomas providing the width. Yuri Tielemans and Wilfred Ndidi are in midfield, and James Maddison's tucked neatly in behind Jamie Vardy and Kelechi Iheanacho. Vincent Guaita starts in goal for Palace, a back four of Joel Ward, Cheku Kiate, Scott Dan and Patrick Van Aanholt. Jordan Ayew, Luka Milivojevic and Jaro Riedewald are across the midfield, with Eberechi Eze and Wilfred Zaha in tandem with Christian Benteke up front, and kickoff at the King Power is at 8 p.m.
We'll be talking to Pat Nevin on the football show a bit later. But Nathan, when it comes to the top four, I think it's about all we have left really to argue about in the Premier League now, because the way the weekend has gone with Newcastle and Burnley picking up very important points, at this stage only realistically Brighton going to get sucked into the relegation race, while the top four looks pretty wide open. I mean, even Everton, who couldn't buy a win for 6 games, get one victory against Arsenal and are within touching distance. Liverpool can't move into the top four, conceding late. And then you get the feeling that Chelsea are probably going to qualify now after that win against West Ham, because no Declan Rice, no Mikel Antonio, the suspensions that they've been picking up as well. I see West Ham drifting out of the top four. How do you see it?
Oh, it's a huge chance for Leicester tonight. Move 7 points clear with 5 games to go. I know they faltered badly last season, but if they can get the win tonight, you'd expect them to go through, even with a difficult finish. The problem for, say, Liverpool, who have been out of it in the race for the top four fields for about 3 months at this stage, but constantly just do enough to keep them there, is they could easily win the last 5 games, but there's nothing in their form to suggest they will do that. They probably need to win them. If they were to win their last 5 games, they probably would end up finishing inside the top four. but we've seen nothing over the past 4 months to suggest that Liverpool can put that sort of run of form together. So it would be a surprise at this stage if Chelsea let it slip, but they do have a Champions League semi-final coming tomorrow night. Maybe there's a focus on that they end up resting players next weekend, but they've such depth that they can put players in and out and there's not a huge dip. So top 4 probably is going to go to the wire at least. The one thing with the relegation fight is Fulham host Newcastle on the final day. That is the only bit of hope there possibly is. So at the moment, Fulham are 9 points behind. Both of them have 5 games left. If Newcastle, who again are in a decent run, and Joe Willock has worked absolute wonders for them with the late goals he scored over the last few weeks, if Fulham could somehow get a couple of wins and put themselves in a position on that last day, knowing that a win against Newcastle could keep them up, well, maybe that would get the excitement that you really want on the final day of the season. But look what's happened in the Championship. It's all pretty much done and dusted with a couple of games to go. The automatic spots, the playoff spots are all more or less done. And the title could well be done next Sunday. We've got Liverpool United live and off the ball. If Manchester City win on Saturday against Palace and Liverpool beat Manchester United, well, City are champions this time next week.
Well, Norwich and Watford coming back up to the Premier League for next season. The thing that shocked me at the weekend, it's the first time in 10 years that the automatic 2 coming up are 2 that went down from the previous season. So it just goes to show how difficult it is to bounce straight back from the Championship. Leinster have been providing an injury update today, Richie, as well, ahead of their trip to La Rochelle on Sunday.
Yeah, and head coach Leo Cullen said it's too early to say whether Johnny Sexton or Caelan Doris will be available for Sunday's Heineken Champions Cup semi-final with La Rochelle. Sexton sat out the weekend defeat to Munster as he continues the return to play protocols following the head injury he sustained against Exeter in the quarter-final a couple of weeks ago, while Cullen says the out-half will continue to go through the required tests before an eventual call is made. He also says they'll monitor the calf injury picked up by Caelan Doris, who was a late withdrawal from that team to face Munster. He himself was only on the comeback trail himself.
In terms of some of your texts coming in as well, Dennis Irwin's been brought up by a few texters. Wonderful player, no doubt one of the best fullbacks ever in the Premier League. Will surely be in the shout of the Hall of Fame. Francis Benali's been brought up as well. The longevity, the moustache, and all-round good looks. That bloke should be straight in there. They broke the mould when they made Big Franco. And 17 minutes into the news round, and Richie, I know you've enjoyed this as well, not a single mention so far of the best sports performance of the weekend, Joey Endo on co-commentary for Sligo Rovers at the weekend against Derry. My word, I've never heard a commentator get so excited about every first touch a player took over a 90-minute period.
I dread to think how bruised Adrian Eames' thigh was when you could just actually hear Joey Endo reaching out and just wanting to grab anything that was close to him, just as he was in thrall with everything that was going on the pitch, particularly from Will Patching at the weekend. It was fantastic. Like it's hard to match that level of enthusiasm. I said it on Twitter yesterday. Joey Endo, as a player, was one of the best I've literally ever seen on a football pitch. The things he could do with the ball were just magnificent. To have that kind of enthusiasm channeled into co-commentary on something like Watch LOI is only a boost for all concerned.
Amazing. Almost the John Milan of the League of Ireland commentaries already, and he's only just 90 minutes into his commentary career. Nathan, would you enjoy having him beside you?
Oh, yeah. And what you want is enthusiasm, and listen, we're fortunate that our co-commentators generally bring that. But if he's like that off the pitch, was he making those noises when he was a player and the ball is on the other side of the pitch and somebody brings it down? He's like, that is good. That is good.
His own first touch was so good.
That's the thing. You'd like those noises would usually be elicited from the crowd at watching Joey do those things. Doing. Exactly. Like it was hard to get the ball off him, both if you're an opposition player or if you're on his team. Like I remember watching the Champions League qualifier at Dalymount Park when Bowes lost out to Salzburg, and it was like it was frustrating to watch him because clearly he knew he was on show and he clearly knew that this was his last time to put himself in the window, not the shop window, but just to show what he could do at a certain level. And very selfish on the ball, but magnificent at what he could do that afternoon. And we were kind of undone by an own goal, a freakish kind of own goal off Mark Rossiter, but just a superb player, one of the greatest the league has ever seen, and long may his co-commentary reign.
Yeah, it's amazing. If you haven't seen it so far, the clip's been doing around all weekend. Sorry, Nathan.
I do remember talking of co-commentators and leaving you a bit sore. Working down at a Munster football final 4 or 5 years ago at Fitzgerald Stadium, beautiful sunny summer's afternoon, and I was in the commentary box with Darragh O'Shea, and I think Mark was still playing at this stage, and every time something happened of note in the game, which was quite a lot in the Munster final, he thumped me in the shoulder and go, "Did you see that?" I'm like, "Well, we're watching the game," so I did see it. Like Darragh O'Shea is not a man you want thumping you on the shoulder. He's not a man you want thumping on the shoulder 50 times during the game. By the end of the match, I had a dead right arm. It was a brilliant analysis from Darragh, who, no matter what Mark did, and Mark may well have ended up being man of the match, did not get one bit of credit in the entire game from his brother. Even in the analysis afterwards, how well did Mark play? Oh, sure, that was best year. Yeah. The other one that stands out for that is, and it was sort of moment of, this is a dream come true. I think I was at Anfield commentating on a Liverpool match with Ray Houghton, and whatever way we were squeezed very close together, and I ended up doing the full match, and Ray Houghton had his arm around me, and every time he wanted to talk, he just tapped me on the shoulder, and I thought, this is living the dream. Anfield, Ray Houghton, just arm, making me feel good, making me feel nice, little tap on the shoulder every time he wants to talk. I'm like, doesn't get any better than this.
Well, snooker commentators are a lot more reserved, Richie. How's Mark Allen getting on?
Yeah, he has to win 7 frames tonight, Will, if he's to make the quarterfinals of the World Snooker Championship, and that's not even taking into consideration what Mark Selby might do to them. They resumed with Allen trailing by 9 frames to 6, and so it remains. Selby has a brief and minor lead in that current frame at the table. On the other table, Sean Murphy leads Yan Bingtao by 10 frames to 6. Murphy looks like he's about to make it 11-6 any moment now. Earlier, Judd Trump progressed to the quarterfinals, courtesy of a 13-8 win over David Gilbert. He'll play the winner of tonight's meeting of Murphy and Yan. Murphy 10-6 up, as I say, on Yan Bingtao, needing just 3 more frames for victory, while Trump scored 4 centuries in his win over Gilbert, but didn't feel it was a particularly high-scoring match.
Yeah, it was strange, really, because I didn't feel like I played that well, but the scoring was there. I could have had a couple more. So, yeah, it's hard to take, really. Sometimes when you're out there playing, you can be a little bit critical on yourself. So, I think my brother, when I spoke to him, he said I was playing good stuff, playing solid. And I think against Dave, you just take any kind of win. I think he's such a good player, and to be in the second round against him, I knew it was going to be a tough draw, but quite happy we've just quietly going through the tournament and got into the last 8 now.
Richie, we were all getting kind of excited about potentially Manila Indo running at Punchestown this weekend, and we could have had a run against Clondaobo particularly, which would have been intriguing, but Manila Indo won't be running at the festival this week. Yeah, it's going to miss the Punchestown Festival. The Cheltenham Gold Cup winner has been withdrawn from Wednesday's Ladbrokes Punchestown Gold Cup after suffering a bruised foot today. Trainer Henry de Bromhead insists the injury is not too serious, but it is enough to force the 8-year-old to skip the remainder of the National Hunt season, of which, of course, there's not much remaining. Yeah, it comes to a conclusion this week, and Paul Townend might be wearing a surgical boot for the week, such as his determination to ride. He's been past fit, and at this stage 4 ahead of Rachel Blackmore in the race to be champion jockey, so that's going to run all week. Looks like Bayern Munich have found their next manager, Rich, and no great surprise, they've shopped inside the Bundesliga. They have indeed. Julian Nagelsmann is poised to become the new head coach at the Allianz Arena. The current RB Leipzig boss will assume the role left vacant, it seems, by the impending departure of Hansi Flick. Nagelsmann has spent the past 2 seasons at Leipzig, leading them to last year's Champions League semi-finals. Reported in the German press today that Bayern are having to pay Leipzig €20 million for his services. This on top of bringing in Dayot Upamecano from the same club in the summer. We were talking about Thierry Henry earlier, Rich, about going into the Hall of Fame. Potentially he could become an owner of Arsenal. This is a story that broke at the weekend that the founder of Spotify could well be trying to buy Stan Kroenke out. Yeah, the founder of Spotify and 3 club legends reportedly preparing a bid to buy Arsenal. Swedish billionaire Daniel Ek is said to be teaming up with Henry, Bergkamp and Patrick Vieira in an effort to oust Stan Kroenke, the American owner, under pressure following his involvement in the botched European Super League. Author Sven Carlson knows Ek pretty well. He was asked today if Ek is ruthless enough to do such a deal.
I mean, ruthless about his priorities, certainly, yes. I mean, he has all criticised for perhaps having a bit too many pet projects as CEO, launching all kinds of more or less realistic side projects. But I think that, of course, anyone who makes it to this level of business is very goal-oriented, and he had the luck and the fortune to be joined by a co-founder who was actually independently wealthy, Martin Lawrenson, when they started. So they were able to sort of remain independent for a while and stay without outside funding, which really made them determined to do something that would leave a mark far outside of Sweden, which of course is what they've done. And I think that these days Daniel Ek is really heralded as one of these visionary tech CEOs, although of course he's not immune to criticism.
Something we're going to be covering in a lot of detail tomorrow with our blog about what could potentially happen around Stan Kroenke and the Gunners hierarchy potentially selling up. Nathan, thanks a million for joining us.
Cheers, Will.
Richie, we'll talk to you tomorrow. When we come back after a short break, we will be joined by Ireland winger Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe on the day of her 26th birthday.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.